10 years on, what do we now know about the disappearance of MH370?
Fade IN. Deep ocean footage, sonar imagery, dark waters. 12 years. That's how long the world has waited for answers. 12 years since a Boeing 777, carrying 239 people, simply vanished from a sky, leaving behind nothing but questions, conspiracy theories, and heartbroken families desperately seeking closure. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. The disappearance that shattered our confidence in modern aviation and exposed the uncomfortable truth. In an age of satellites, GPS, and real-time tracking, a commercial aircraft could still disappear without a trace. But here's what's remarkable. While the main wreckage of MH370 remains hidden in one of Earth's most hostile environments, the search itself has revolutionized our understanding of deep-sea exploration, and the technology deployed to find it, underwater drones so advanced they seem pulled from science fiction, has fundamentally changed how we explore the ocean floor. This is the story of those drones, the refined theories about where the plane went, and what the most comprehensive underwater search in history revealed. It's a story about human persistence, technological innovation, and the lengths we'll go to solve mysteries that haunt us. Let's start where all mysteries begin, the beginning. March 8, 2014, 12:41 a.m. local time. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 pushed back from Kuala Lumpur International Airport on what should have been an ordinary overnight flight to Beijing. The weather was clear. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was in perfect mechanical condition. The crew was experienced and professional. Everything pointed to a textbook 6-hour journey. For the first 40 minutes, that's exactly what it was. At 1:19 a.m., Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah transmitted his final message to Malaysian Air Traffic Control. Good night, Malaysian 370. Routine. Professional. Ordinary. 2 minutes later, everything changed. The aircraft's transponder, the device that broadcasts its location, altitude, and identifying information to radar stations, was deliberately switched off. Not a malfunction. Not a system failure. Someone physically turned it off. Deliberately. Within moments, civilian air traffic control lost all contact. The plane had simply disappeared from their screens. Military radar, however, continued tracking an unidentified target, making a sharp, deliberate turn to the west, back over the Malay Peninsula, heading toward the Strait of Malacca. By 2:22 a.m., military radar lost the target approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang Island. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. What followed was the largest aviation search in history. 50 aircraft, nearly 60 ships, representatives from 26 nations, including China, Australia, the United States, and India. The initial search covered the South China Sea, the Gulf of Thailand, the Strait of Malacca, and the Andaman Sea. Nothing. On March 24, 2014, 16 days after the disappearance, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak made an announcement that broke millions of hearts. It is therefore with a heavy heart and a deep sense of sadness and regret that I must inform you that, according to new satellite information, we can say with a high degree of certainty that the aircraft communications addressing and reporting system was disabled just before the aircraft reached the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia. From this point onwards, the Royal Malaysian Air Force primary radar showed that an aircraft which was believed, but not confirmed, to be MH370 did indeed turn back. The plane had flown on for hours after disappearing from civilian radar, its satellite data unit continuing to send automated handshake signals to Inmarsat satellites until 8:19 a.m. Based on these signals and refined Doppler analysis, investigators concluded that the aircraft had flown into the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote, brutal, and inaccessible stretches of ocean on Earth. The implications were staggering. A modern commercial aircraft, with 239 people on board, had been deliberately diverted from its course, and it crashed in waters so deep and so distant that finding it would require an unprecedented technological and logistical effort. What followed was a lesson in the challenges of deep ocean exploration and the limits of technology in the modern world. The initial multinational search effort ran from March through April 2014, covering approximately 46,000 square miles of ocean. When no wreckage was found on the surface, the focus shifted to underwater operations. Between 2014 and 2017, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau led a major seabed survey, supported by China and Malaysia. Working from the vessel Ocean Shield, equipped with a towed pinger locator designed to detect signals from the aircraft's black boxes, searchers mapped 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor. They used state-of-the-art echo-sounding technology to create the most detailed underwater maps of that region ever produced. The data they collected was so comprehensive that it would later be used for climate research and oceanographic studies. Despite this extraordinary effort, costing $155 million and spanning 3 years, the main wreckage was never found. It wasn't until July 2015, 16 months after the disappearance, that the first confirmed physical evidence emerged. A flaperon, part of the wing's trailing edge, washed up on Réunion Island, a French territory in the Indian Ocean. The discovery was bittersweet. It confirmed that the aircraft had indeed crashed in the Indian Ocean, but it also highlighted the vastness of the search area. If wreckage was being carried by ocean currents from the crash site to distant shores, the search zone was far larger and more complex than anyone had anticipated. Over the following years, additional pieces of debris washed ashore. A landing gear component on Mozambique, seat cushions and parts of the fuselage on Tanzania's coast. More than 30 items, in total, believed to be from MH370, were recovered from beaches and islands across the Indian Ocean and African coast. Yet none of these discoveries pinpointed the location of the main wreckage. In fact, they raised new questions. Ocean current modeling suggested that debris found on the African coast would have required the aircraft to crash significantly further south than many experts had theorized. This discrepancy between theoretical impact zones and actual debris drift patterns became central to evolving search strategies. In 2018, Ocean Infinity, a private marine robotics company, launched its first independent search effort, deploying 8 autonomous underwater vehicles across 112,000 square kilometers. Again, the search concluded without finding the main wreckage. By 2021, the official search was declared complete. The consensus among aviation experts was clear. MH370 had crashed in the southern Indian Ocean, but the specific location remained unknown. The combination of the ocean's immense depth, complex underwater topography, powerful currents, and the vastness of the search area made finding a single large object, even a Boeing 777, extraordinarily difficult. The families of the 239 people on board waited and waited, but technology doesn't stand still. While the world moved on with its collective uncertainty, advances in autonomous underwater vehicle technology were quietly revolutionizing deep-sea exploration. The drones being developed for underwater research in the 2020s bore little resemblance to the equipment used in the original MH370 searches. These weren't remote-controlled robots requiring constant human intervention through fiber optic cables. These were truly autonomous systems, underwater vehicles that could be programmed with a mission, deployed into the abyss, and left to work independently for days at a time. Kongsberg, a Norwegian marine technology company, had developed the Hugin series of autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. These machines represented the cutting edge of deep-sea robotics. They could dive to depths approaching 6,000 meters, nearly 20,000 feet below the surface, and remain submerged for up to 100 hours, systematically mapping and imaging the seafloor as they traveled. But what made these machines truly revolutionary wasn't just their depth capability or endurance. It was their sensor suite. Traditional sonar systems worked by sending out sound waves and analyzing the returning echoes. These new AUVs carried multiple integrated sonar systems, working in concert. Multi-beam sonar created three-dimensional maps of the seafloor with remarkable detail, allowing operators to identify ridges, valleys, volcanic formations, and other geological features. Side-scan sonar generated high-resolution imagery of the seabed, providing what operators describe as X-ray vision for the ocean floor. Objects on the seafloor would appear as distinct shapes against the background. Sub-bottom profiling sonar could penetrate seafloor sediment, detecting objects that might be buried under years of accumulated mud and silt. Magnetometers could detect metallic objects from a distance, making them particularly valuable for locating aircraft wreckage with its substantial aluminum and steel components. All of this data was processed in real time using increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms. Machine learning models trained on existing seafloor imagery could identify anomalies, objects that didn't match typical geological features, and flag them for human review. By 2024, the technology had advanced to the point where it became feasible to conduct truly comprehensive seabed surveys of large ocean areas. And crucially, the sophistication of satellite data analysis and drift modeling had also improved dramatically. In parallel with technological advancement came new analysis of existing data. For over a decade, aviation experts, engineers, and investigators had been re-examining the evidence. The satellite handshake signals, the radar data, ocean current models, debris drift patterns. Each piece of evidence was analyzed and reanalyzed, cross-referenced against every other piece, modeled and remodeled. By 2024, a refined picture had emerged, not a definitive answer, but a narrowed field of possibilities. The southern Indian Ocean search area had been divided into multiple zones based on probability analysis. Some areas were considered higher probability based on Doppler analysis of the Inmarsat signals. Other areas became relevant based on where debris had actually washed ashore and how ocean currents would have transported it. Australian researcher Peter Foley, who had overseen much of the official 2014 to 2017 search effort as head of the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, began publicly expressing cautious optimism about renewed search efforts. His endorsement was significant. Foley wasn't speculating wildly. He was grounded in the scientific evidence and the operational realities of deep-sea search. In early 2025, as Ocean Infinity prepared to launch a new search effort, Malaysian authorities announced that the operation would be based on credible new evidence. Exactly what that evidence was remained classified, but informed observers suggested it involved refined analysis of the Inmarsat data, updated ocean current models, and possibly additional analytical work on signal propagation analysis. On February 25, 2025, Malaysia's transport minister formally announced that a new search would commence, conducted by Ocean Infinity under a no-find, no-fee agreement. The company would receive $70 million if and only if it successfully located the aircraft's wreckage. The search zone was targeted at a 15,000 square kilometer area in the southern Indian Ocean, a significant reduction from the hundreds of thousands of square kilometers searched previously. This refined focus area represented the culmination of over a decade of analytical work. On December 30, 2025, after a months-long weather hiatus, operations resumed. Ocean Infinity dispatched the Armada 7806, a Norwegian-built survey vessel measuring 78 meters in length. This wasn't a traditional research ship. It was essentially a floating command center, a mothership for a swarm of autonomous underwater vehicles. The vessel carried the latest in communications equipment, data processing infrastructure, and autonomous vehicle management systems. The operational concept was revolutionary in its coordination. Multiple AUVs would be deployed simultaneously, working as a coordinated swarm rather than individual units. Each vehicle would follow a programmed survey pattern, systematically covering the seafloor while continuously transmitting data back to the surface vessel. Uncrewed surface vessels, USVs, essentially drone boats, would act as communication relays and power stations for the AUVs, extending the effective range and endurance of the underwater systems. The mission that unfolded across early 2026 represented the most technologically sophisticated underwater search ever conducted. The Armada 7806 and its fleet of drones methodically worked through the designated search area. In 2 operational phases, a brief 4-day effort in late March 2025, and then an extended 23-day campaign from December 31, 2025 to January 23, 2026. The team scanned approximately 7,571 square kilometers of the Indian Ocean seabed. The sonar systems painted detailed images of the underwater landscape, deep trenches where the seafloor dropped away precipitously, underwater ridges and mountains, scattered rock formations, and vast plains of sediment. The data revealed a geologically complex environment, exactly the kind of terrain that would make locating a specific crash site extraordinarily challenging. The advanced imaging systems operated essentially around the clock, taking advantage of every moment of favorable weather. The southern Indian Ocean seasonal patterns allowed only a narrow weather window between December and April when operations could reliably proceed. Outside that window, storms and rough seas would make both surface and underwater operations too dangerous. Weather, in fact, became one of the mission's major challenges. Unexpected storms forced operational pauses. Equipment malfunctions required troubleshooting and repairs. The unforgiving environment of the southern Indian Ocean, described by one researcher as close to nowhere as it's possible to be, tested every system and every team member's resolve. When the operation concluded on January 23, 2026, the mission had scanned over 140,000 square kilometers of seabed across all phases since 2025, a staggering accomplishment in underwater exploration. But the primary objective had not been achieved. No confirmed wreckage of MH370 was located. Yet to characterize the mission solely by this absence would be to miss something crucial. The search revealed far more than what wasn't found. First and foremost, the data collected represents an unprecedented archive of the southern Indian Ocean seafloor. The high-resolution sonar imagery, the 3D terrain mapping, the sub-bottom profiling data, all of it is being retained for future analysis and research. Climate scientists studying ocean floor processes, oceanographers investigating seafloor hydrothermal systems, and future search efforts can all benefit from these detailed maps. Second, the mission validated the technological approach. The autonomous underwater vehicles performed as designed. The swarm coordination methodology proved viable. The integrated sensor suite successfully captured the level of detail necessary for a comprehensive seafloor survey. The artificial intelligence system successfully identified and flagged anomalies for human review. This matters profoundly. Ocean Infinity's technological success means that the methodology used for MH370 can now be applied to other deep-sea exploration challenges. Future searches for missing aircraft, sunken ships, or other underwater objectives now have a proven technological framework. Third, the refined search area methodology worked. The team successfully narrowed the vast search zone based on decades of accumulated evidence and analysis. The 15,000 square kilometer zone was fully surveyed, something that hadn't been accomplished before. This represents genuine scientific progress in understanding where MH370 likely went down, even if the wreckage itself wasn't found. Fourth, and perhaps most significantly for families and investigators, the thoroughness of the search has effectively ruled out certain scenarios. If MH370's wreckage isn't in this carefully selected, extensively surveyed zone, then the assumptions underlying the search area selection require reconsideration. This provides valuable feedback to investigators. Science proceeds not only through discoveries, but through the elimination of hypotheses. The MH370 mystery, and the extraordinary efforts to solve it, has fundamentally changed aviation. Within months of the disappearance, aviation authorities worldwide began implementing new tracking requirements. The International Civil Aviation Organization mandated that modern commercial aircraft would transmit their position automatically and continuously, rather than relying solely on pilots to report their location to air traffic control. New regulations now require aircraft in distress to broadcast their position every minute. Longer battery life requirements for emergency locator transmitters mean these devices can broadcast for longer periods from wreckage in the ocean. The aviation industry has implemented more sophisticated aircraft tracking systems. Real-time monitoring of aircraft position is no longer a luxury. It's a standard expectation. Airlines now have access to live flight tracking data that would have been impossible to access in 2014. These changes, born from MH370's disappearance, mean that another aircraft disappearing in similar circumstances would face vastly different search conditions. The lessons learned have been incorporated into the operational procedures of every major airline and aviation authority worldwide. In this sense, while MH370 was a tragedy, it catalyzed safety improvements that will potentially save lives across the aviation industry for decades to come. Behind every technical detail, every sonar image, Every billion-dollar search effort are the 239 people who were on that aircraft. There were business people heading to meetings in Beijing. There were tourists. There were families traveling together. There were individuals pursuing dreams, heading toward new chapters of their lives. Among the passengers were 20 Chinese artists returning from an art exhibition. There was a group of Chinese semiconductor engineers. There was a 2-year-old child, one of the youngest passengers.